Hello, I'm Nathan Weeb, the pastor at the Wetaskiwin Church of God. I'm here at Deer Valley Meadows in the fireside room. Can you guess why it's called that? Anyway, I like to come down here and have some time for prayer and to walk around the grounds and just, this is one of the places I come to hear from the Lord. And as I was walking around today, I was thinking about quite a few different things, but one of the things I was thinking about was why I love being part of the Church of God. I thought, I'm going to share some stories with you about that. Because when I think about part of what I would long for with you and people in the congregation is the opportunity for you to understand and to be part of the Church of God in a deeper way. And I've been part of the Church of God since I was born. And the thing that I love most is that these are my people. The people within the Church of God have been part of my story. And that's important to me. It's the only story I have. So when I'm here in this room, I see these plaques, like these ones here on the wall. This one here talks about Don and Shirley Snell and the service that they offered here at this camp many years ago. Let me tell you a little bit about that story, because it's part of my story. Back in the day, Don and Shirley were pastors at Drayton Valley Church of God. And that is where my mother was teaching school. Mom came to know them at the church and worship there, and through their ministry and being brought to a crusade, my mom came to know Jesus Christ and got to know Him more intimately and follow Him more faithfully. She really loved the Snells, and they meant a lot to her. And so when they moved and changed pastorates all the way down to Ontario, they went to Kitchener. Well, Kitchener just so happened to be where my father was attending church at the Church of God. And it wasn't too long before they were brought together, and they found that they had some mutual interests and were getting married in 1977. So the Snells were part of my family history in a more intimate way than most. But, very early on, Pastor Snell was our pastor. There was no Church of God in our town, and so we actually commuted to Kitchener still from the Hamilton area. And actually, Don Snell did my baby dedication. So we've gone back a ways. Fast forward a few years, when we would come out west as a family on a trip to visit family members throughout Manitoba and Alberta and BC, we would often make a point of stopping and visiting with the Snells because they had a deep connection with our family. And not only did they perform my parents' wedding, but dedicated me as a baby. And then we would visit with them, and I remember some times when we would, I remember visiting them here at this camp when it was early on when they served here. I remember a picture out in front of this side of the dining hall here with the giant wooden wall panels with Don and Shirley out there when I was a small child. Fast forward a few more years, I came out to Gardner College in Camrose after I was done high school and began to pursue a Bachelor of Theology there. Don Snell was still around. Shirley had passed. Don was still around, and he was living with his daughter Janice, who is a very talented and capable singer, and she was actively involved with the worship team at the Camrose Church of God. And it was pretty common that after church in Camrose there, when Pastor Brian Crucial was the pastor, after church we would go to lunch, and we enjoyed going to lunch at the Monte Carlo. We'd sometimes go elsewhere, but as a college student who didn't have a lot of money, they often would treat me. Don and Janice would treat me to lunch, and it was a tasty meal there, and I do remember they had a very good cheesecake afterwards. So we'd have some dessert, and I remember Don would tell stories. And I just loved those stories. Don was a pastor and called to the ministry. And he pastored in Calgary and in Drayton Valley and in Ontario and in a number of places. And he would tell stories when we would be at lunch. And I loved having lunch with this old man and his daughter. And they were so close that I would call him Grandpa. I called him Grandpa Snell. And he would tell these stories of pastoring back when it was tough. Not that it's easy now, but man, I had such respect for that man. He told about pastoring in Calgary where sometimes food would be so sparse that people from the church would in part pay him with some food, but he would have to go hunting. So he became at least an adequate hunter because he would have to hunt to provide food for his family. They didn't have enough money from the salary of the church, and so he would talk about the time when he would get a moose and how God provided a moose or a deer or something, and God was faithful again and again. He would tell the story of being down in Anderson camp meeting and being so sick that his wife had to go around in the trailer park there and get ice from all of their neighbors because Don was burning up. And they didn't know exactly what was wrong, but he was in a bad state. But that he would go to the prayer service and be prayed over, and God miraculously healed him. He remembered that and telling those stories of highlights, being part of that. And so I loved going to lunch with Don and Janice and hearing his stories again. And even as his memory would fail, he had about 5 or 6 stories, and I would hear the same ones through those weeks and months and years. And I just came to really love them. And when he would start to tell them, another one that he would tell is how he used to work at an ice cream factory near Anderson when he was down there for schooling, and how something had gone wrong with the freezer. And so they said, what are we going to do with all these little cups of ice cream? And Don just put his arm out and he just scraped them down the whole table. And he said, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. And sure enough, he ate them all. He could eat ice cream like nobody's business, and it never made him sick. But I sure loved those people. And Grandpa Snell and Janice and Shirley, they meant a lot to me and still do. And so when I'm here at Deer Valley Meadows and I see a plaque, it reminds me of so many things just from their little names. Why do I share that story? What does that matter to you? Well, friends, I just want you to realize that the Church of God really is special. There's lots of churches out there, but the Church of God is my church. It's my community. It's my family. And I want to invite you to be a part of it. I want to invite you to invest in the stories that we are telling here in Wetaskiwin, here in Alex at the camp. When you choose to do that, you too can become part of a community and a family, and your stories begin to intertwine with other people's stories. And all of a sudden, you find yourself belonging to something bigger than yourself, that you have a part of. And isn't that what we all long for? As our stories intersect, we begin to have a positive ripple effect that creates echoes in eternity. One last story, bringing it up to present day, about this camp. A couple of years ago, I met a man named Ken Froese. We would be out here for our annual family camp in July, and we'd be around the campfire at night and sort of laughing and having some good times and roasting some marshmallows. And Ken often would volunteer as sort of a security patrol at night, and he'd have the little golf cart and bomb around and make sure the teens weren't getting into too much trouble. But I met Ken a couple of times around the campfire. Well, a couple of years ago, I ran into Ken and Faye here at the camp. And Faye was involved with the children's ministry, and our oldest son was we were trying to get him involved. He was a little afraid, but Faye did a good job to connect with him. And I heard that they were moving, that Ken's job had required a move, and that they were actually going to be moving to Ponoka. So I said, boy, I should really talk to them about that. So I made a point to talk with Ken and Faye Froese as they moved to Ponoka and said, hey, we've got another family or two that come up to our Church of God in Wetaskiwin. And they shared with me a little bit about how their roots were in the Church of God and they loved coming to this camp, but where they were before, they didn't really have a congregation anywhere nearby. So this was kind of an interesting invitation. Sure enough, we fast forward to this year. Ken and Faye have been a faithful part of our congregation. Faye has begun to get involved with our children's ministry and bring all of her skills and talents and gifts to that. And just this year, Ken has been elected to be part of our board. Now, that's a wonderful thing. And I just wanted to say that's an example of how God works through places like this camp and through churches like ours to connect people like you and me and those in our congregation, to give us a story that combines as God writes His story in our lives and in our communities. Again, I just want to invite you to consider how you can be a part of it, whether it's coming to the camp or getting more involved in our congregation. We want you to be involved with our community. And it's one of the things I love about the Church of God so much, is that it's my community and it's my family, and I want you to be a part.